Hello, hello. Welcome to the Becoming Zesty podcast. We are so happy that you are here. Welcome, welcome. Today, I'm going to be talking about getting a little salty and really what the difference is. And it's a really empowering difference between getting to a point in life where we acknowledge that we're a little salty about things and how that is very different and much more empowering than, say, cynicism, which is a lot of what people equate it to, right? Like when people translate it as a synonym, a lot of times people are like, that's the same thing, it's just that you're cynical. But to me, well, to us here at Zesty in general, languaging matters, right? Languaging essentially tells us how we or someone else have concepts hardwired in our brain that allow us to make sense of the world, right? So everybody uses language the way they see the world. And so, here at Zesty, we always remind people that people are telling exactly what they're thinking pretty much all the time. Now, sometimes that's with actual language, sometimes with body language and eye patterns and all of those things that anybody can study. Is they're telling us what's going on, whether they're trying to lie, intentionally lying, telling the truth, don't have any idea what's going on, any and all of it is that there's ways to tell, because that's how the wiring of the brain actually happens, right? So we string words together for a reason. And a lot of times people will blurt out things and then they'll go, oh my gosh, right? Like they have the internal aha themselves. And that's really the power of discovering the fact that words aren't just words. They're not just what we call something. They're not a semantics kind of thing. It's more on, but why that word choice? Why that combination? Why that order? Why that, what is explained in the wording here? And so even though it seems a little bit small and detail oriented to define salty versus cynical, the whole rub of this conversation, the reason we care about languaging and all of these things so much, is there's empowerment that happens when we make an accurate differentiator find, right? Like if we actually discover what's different and what's accurate within our wording, a lot of times it can actually point to, oh my gosh, there is a difference here. And these aren't the same. And there's a reason that we got different words to explain different experiences here on this planet, right? And so the definition of salty versus cynicism essentially comes down to, you'll hear the commonality is action. There's a lot of power in considering our mental body and our emotional body, what we think and how we feel about that. Of course, a lot of times what is actually happening is that our thoughts make us feel a certain way, and that either drives us to action or it drives us to inaction. For a lot of what we'll talk about is that the thoughts and therefore the feelings that follow, or it can be a feeling and a thought that explains it, right? Whatever that is then will create the state in the body that will determine action or inaction, right? Am I going to do something or is it too late? And so as we discover the difference between salty and cynical here, really one of the commonalities of being salty, and why I think it's perfectly acceptable to get to a point in life where we feel salty for a period of time, or we just acknowledge that that's where we've gotten to, because really at the end of the day, the things that define salty, the common ground of them is that the person and you still feel like I can do something about this, even though it's hard, or there might be obstacles, or I don't understand why it's like this, or I don't understand why this is necessary. At the end of the day, it feels like, well, even though blank, I can still fill in the blank, right? Whatever it is for you. And when it comes down to the commonality of cynicism, and it starts sounding like I give up, And on top of it, I am annoyed that you think you can do something. Like, right? The cynicism kind of starts to get at more like, not only I don't feel like I can do something, but where do you get off thinking that you can do something, right? Like, where do you think you're important enough that the things you do matter, but I don't believe that the things I do matter? And so you can hear right away, it's not a small difference. We're not talking about like, oh, well, I just like this word. It's more about when we land on a word and then we acknowledge that the way that we see that, the way that we interpret it will then determine what happens next from it. It behooves us then to consider, which category am I falling into? What's happening here, and where is there availability to work with this? Because here's the whole rub. This is a conversation that stems from an in-person local group here in Dallas that we run. Right, so it's called the Salty Smarties, and if you're tuning in from the Salty Smarties group, hi, hello, welcome to the podcast. We're so glad you're here. But part of what we were doing is serving the community and building relationships within the local community. We've always been a win-win-win sort of company and people here at Zesty, and so for us, that's part of it. And so these meetings are bringing people together, and we have multiple groups, right? But part of the reason we created this one is because there was a common theme that we began to see, is that there's a group, the reason we call it Salty Smarties, is that there are either physically, mentally, emotionally, and or spiritually burned out, really powerful people in the world, like people who they're professionals, they have degrees, they have occupations that they work, they serve people, they help people, they're just solid humans, like really trying to help, doing the right thing. They've done it all, you know what I mean? Like everything that you can define by society is like doing the right thing and working with yourself in life. They've done it. But we come to this point where sometimes we see and we acknowledge the fact that I'm doing all this stuff because I keep getting told that this is the right thing to do. I have this whole checklist. I'm knocking it off. I got the check marks going, but why don't I feel a type of way? Like, why don't I feel the peace or the joy or the happiness or the exploration or the growth? Like, I feel like I'm stuck, I'm stagnant. And so in that camp, when we feel that, it's so helpful to say, in life, it's not necessarily a bad thing to get to that point, because so many of us, when we grow up, we are living off programming. Someone else started defining words for us. And another way to say it is they started setting the way that we were going to interpret life. They decided how we're going to see things. So the choices that we've made up until a certain point off of that conditioning in some ways can't be referred to as free will choices. Right? Because if they were either in line with the programming, well, then it's the programming playing out. And if they were a reaction to the programming, well, then it's just the opposite of it a lot of times, or some sort of reactionary. It's not a free will, neutral decision that says, I can do anything, I'm not boxed in, and I get to decide right now. And so in that way, as we begin to filter through that discovery, a lot of times it's the emotions of saltiness, and it can be things like bitterness, frustration, irritation, right? There are things that we call negative emotions, but for this the purpose of the definition, we want to also say that for saltiness to be defined, while there's the presence of that quote-unquote negative emotional landscape, there is still the awareness that it's for something. It's to say, what if this saltiness is almost like a marination. It's the reminder that, oh, I'm built for something greater than this. And in some ways I like the idea of this, because a lot of us, especially as parents, wonder like, are our kids going to need therapy and things like that. And Megan and I always joke like well, we don't joke, but our take is like, yes, they probably will. And that's because there's a helpful functionality to learning how the world works in terms of rules, and then getting to decide how you want to break them, so to speak. And I'm not talking about breaking laws, right? These are just like the rules of societal rules that are subjective. And it's to us the same way as you would learn the grammar of writing in English or in any other language, and then you could go to writing poetry in it, but you wouldn't know what poetry is if you didn't first know what regular grammatically correct English was. I hope that makes sense. So the crossover there is, I think, the same functionality. The saltiness is almost more like a red flag that goes off internally that says, hey, is now a good opportunity to see the world differently? Because what if the saltiness has that functionality, right, of just like the ocean? it's a turning over. What if we are reminded of, but what action can I take? What do I have control over? What can I do? What do I bring to the table? What is it that happens here? And so let me read through what I had in terms of thoughts and experiences that I think are defined by saltiness. And then I'm going to contrast that to what cynicism sounds like. You will hear that when it comes to saltiness and the reinterpretation of life, there's adult level nuances in it. As in, the sentence structures themselves are longer. There's more information, there's more detail, there's higher number of words to explain, and that gets at the nuances, the complexity of life, which then of course leads it to feel rich and fulfilling and all of that, right? Whereas a lot of the statements on the cynical aspects and the descriptions of the experiences sound very black and white, they sound very categorical, and they are simplistic in nature. A lot of times these concepts and the interpretations that we made in the world, when we experience something as unpleasant, traumatic, whether it's big T or little t trauma, we can arrest that aspect of the interpretation. That is to say, we can, when we have the thought of life is hard, that sentence alone, like maybe a 6-year-old, 7-year-old can say something like that, right? Because it's a short sentence, it's to the point, and it gets the thought across. And so sometimes that part of us that made that interpretation really is arrested. That's why we can have all these, ahas and journal and go to therapy and things like that. And then the next day we find ourselves acting exactly like we did the day before, and that aha didn't matter at all. Well, that's how we play that out. That is the hard wiring, and oftentimes it harkens back to when we first had that thought, and then as we grow up in life, then oftentimes what we end up seeing is the confirmation of those beliefs, right? If we believe life is hard early on, then that's what the brain is hardwired to look for. When it has an experience that confirms that life is hard, it says, great, we are efficient at that. That is helping our survival, and that is what I'm here to do as the brain. Which is, of course, very different than our soul purpose. Kind of the reason why we think we're here, the expansion and growth and service and love and joy and, community and all of these amazing things. It's different than efficiency and survival. And so it can reinforce when we grew up in a cynical environment, and that's me right here, then we can oftentimes have the programming to see it cynically instead. And there's nothing wrong with any one of these. I mean, honestly, I can full flow say that I was in the cynical category at some point in life. I had blown past salty. I mean, I had the thing is, I knew how to write these statements because I had been there. It's just that I self gaslit myself so hard on them that I was like, no, just think positive, just be positive, you'll feel all right, and it's cool. And I just kept pushing and pushing, right? It was med school and residency after all of that stuff, and it came to a time where it was like just the pressure cooker of it landed me smack dab into cynicism. And on top of that, I recognized it. It felt familiar. It was what I had grown up with. And while it felt comfortable in the, oh, right, I recognize this kind of way, at the end of the day, what ends up happening, and thank goodness, is that no matter where we end up in life, good, bad, or indifferent, life has this funny mirror mechanism, doesn't it? Because no matter how much we try to run away and stuff things down, here comes somebody in our life being annoying as heck, trying to get it, like they either say something to us, do something that reminds us we don't have it, or we do have something we don't want. Someone does something where it goes, oh gosh, now I'm reminded again. It's just life doesn't seem to allow us to stay delusional, even if we get there. And so in a very protective sort of way, thank goodness it works like this, that's how I realized that I had missed all the utility of the exit signs of saltiness. And that is why I was experiencing the negative effects and the emotional turmoil of landing into cynicism, and then finding, oh gosh, I have plenty of interpretations down here in cynicism that make sense. They sound a lot like my dad, And so once I was in there, it helped also to identify these things. And so this is something that I actually have written out a list like this for myself in the past, just to understand what it is that I'm thinking and feeling and how it's impacting me. But I'm going to go through it here. This is the updated one. I went through salty versus cynical. How do we actually define it? So right now, I do hear this a lot online. The world is ending, right? On this cynicism. It's like the world's ending and that's it. There's no ending to that. And saltiness is my world is being impacted by how everyone else is seeing the world and the fact that they think it's ending. You see, it's so much more nuanced there. But it's not saying my world's not ending. I'm just saying I'm salty about the fact that y'all can impact my world that much. And it kind of seems like y'all are going off the rails. Right, so, see which side you fall out in. The cynical says, I'm all alone in this. And saltiness says, we heal collaboratively. I just can't find those people that want to do this. Of course, that was actually one that I heard myself think at some point. Hence why we have many meetup groups and more coming, and online community and just leadership gathering, community building out the wazoo, because that is where my alarm went off and it said, okay, but there's actions that I can take, right? If I can't find people, have I tried everything? And when the answer was no, okay, well then I have other things to do, right? The world can't end if there's other things to try. And so that's how we ended up with groups. Okay, cynicism says nothing I do matters. Saltiness says I have a role to play. It's just hard to do it. It might say it's there's just a lot of obstacles to doing it. It's lonely. It's tiring. It's energy draining. It's having to go against the grain. Whatever it is. I have a role to play. I just don't know if I can do it. I don't know if I can. I don't know if I'll be impacted by the world too much. Okay, cynicism says everybody has become bad in the world. I can't trust anyone or anything. Luckily, we haven't had too many in that category in the group, but there are people that are like, my mind is blown that someone could put together a group that's just for meeting people. It's just for networking. It's just for being kind to each other. It's just for coming together and having a good time, right? And we could see, because the words they said, I don't believe that there's still anybody good remaining. Now, I didn't ask if that included them, but that's the thing. Whereas saltiness sounds like some people are bad, some people are good, and sometimes it's hard to tell which is which. Maybe I'm a little salty about all that. Maybe it sounds good, but then it doesn't end up being that way. Or it was like this, and then it got all messed up. Now it's like this. All right. Saltiness is not the absence of problems. It's just not the blanket pull over of now everything's bad. Now everything just sucks. Now everybody that's trying to do something good is trying to sell me. Everybody that's trying to sell me is just trying to make money and doesn't care about me. Right? It starts to build on that kind of thing. All right. Cynicism says, if my effort isn't confirmed from the outside, it's just wishful thinking. That is to say, if you think positively and then you don't get all the results that you want manifested in a week, a month, a year, whatever, then I just made it up. Manifestation doesn't exist. My thoughts don't matter. The reticular activating system doesn't look for confirmations of what I want in the world. This is all just bogus, and I just need to face the reality, right? Which I ain't knocking anybody. I've been there. But that's what that sounds like. Saltiness says, it's hard to not be pulled by the world. But I am who I say I am for the most part, as best as I can. Right? Again, so much more nuance here. Is to say, yes, the results may not be here yet, but who I am is not dependent on that. If who I say I am isn't confirmed immediately or shortly thereafter, and in the scope of life, even a year or a couple of years is not the longest, right? then in that, if it's not confirmed quickly, then I must be wrong. That's right, to burn the whole thing down. Whereas saltiness allows for that space to say, for the most part, I get to be who I am now. I may go on any given day. I might get bummed about this, or I might get down on that. I may kind of get into a negative state and not take any action. But I can always, for the most part, say, I am allowed to be independent of the world. Just because the world is a certain way does not mean that I am held to that standard and that I am locked into that reality. Yeah. All right. Cynicism says, I have to protect myself from everyone else. Cynicism or saltiness says, I want to protect and help good people like me. We can be salty about the bad things that happen. I'm not denying that the world's a little chaotic at the moment, and that there aren't some destructive forces at play, and that not everyone's doing the right thing, right? But do you believe that you want to protect and help good people? Do you believe that someone wants to protect and help good people in this world? All right. Sometimes cynicism just throws up its hands and says, why is the world like this? Saltiness says, why is the world like this? And what can I do about that? I like that one. I like that one because it gets to the commonality, right? There's action steps associated with saltiness. Saltiness is simply the awareness that the limitations, the obstacles, the smallness, the small box that we put ourselves into, there's more outside of it. It's the internal awareness that we have that says, oh, wait, what if there's more to it, right? When we get into cynicism and we close down ourselves, right? That's to say, we close off our hearts to say, I can't trust. We close off our minds and our vision and say, I can't have it anyways. We close down our spirit and say, I can't hear you, spirit. It doesn't matter what my purpose is. Let me just go to my job, clock in, clock out, make dinner, and go to bed, start all over again. When we lose sight of that, and I will take action piece of it, that is where it gets kind of dicey, right? This is where we need each other to function as the mirrors, to say, even when I annoy you with my action-oriented efforts, how can we play an important role in being each other's mirrors? Because you never know. Like, as much as, I teach this, we do this for a living, it's obviously top of mind, we embody it all the time, but life's life. Life can life in any sort of way. And God forbid something happens to me where I lose sight of who I am and what I'm doing here. I need you all, and I mean like the world. I need the world to function as my mirror to remind me, because when I hear myself say the things over here, I'll know that and I'll see the response, right? When I see someone striving, I'll say, right, I got cynical because of that. And luckily, I can sit here saying that from a place of having gone through that before, to say, oh my gosh, any one of us needs this. We need each other, leaders and the people who are here to serve the world. We need each other to remember this kind of stuff, because anything can happen. And as much as we can be in control of our responses and our reactions and the choices that we make moving forward, at the end of the day, there's a protective function in being in circles that are looking out for one another, being around people who, even if it's not perfect, chose to be at Salty. They chose to say, I'm not going to deny anything. I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to be inauthentic. I'm not going to put on the rose-colored glasses. But at the same time, I didn't give up. I'm not done. I'm just being honest, right? And when we come together in circles like that, and we say, let's at least have that as the bottom point, where we catch people in their saltiness. And you can hear from the start of this, I didn't have that. I hadn't thought through all of that and had not created that for myself. And of course, as we've moved, that has gotten created, and now there's a group that you can join. We're gonna put I'm gonna put a link in the show notes for that. There's also a link for NLP for people who want to change the world. And so whether you are local or not, please join, because we're going to also have not only in-person events, but online and hybrid events where you can either come in person if you're in the area, or you can be online, and we will you won't be missing out on anything. So definitely check out the show notes for those two groups. If you are available and can make it, our next Salty Smarties event is May 15th, 2024. And that is in the meetup group, all of the information that's posted there. So if you're not in there already, just go ahead and go to the show notes and click to check out the group, and all of the information is there. No matter where you live, you are welcome. It is pretty much downtown-ish area Dallas, so whether you are in Fort Worth or a surrounding area, anywhere in Texas, you are welcome to come. We will be doing quite a few events, more and more as we go, so definitely check out those groups. And come say hello, come stop by, and you can always shoot us an email to say hello as well. It's support@becomingzesty.com. Anything you want to reach out about, we welcome it. Thank you so much for being here, and I will see you on the next episode.